Andy quite a bit. This is something that controls the behavior of the controls, more or less, that are on the bottom of the YouTube player. It's not necessarily the initial behavior of the controls, but it's more like what happens to the controls once controls, more or less, that are on the bottom. And I'm going to demonstrate the ways of setting those different values. The initial behavior of the controls is more like what happens to the YouTube player controls, more or less, that are on the bottom. This is another really great resource, and it's kind of an alternative to, you know, writing this code over here or writing this in JS Fiddle. It's just a way to kind of play around with these parameters in a live setting, and you can kind of think of it like our API Explorer, if you've ever used that for our data APIs. This is the equivalent for our player APIs. So what it lets you do is go over here on the right and start choosing different values for the parameters. And I mean, I'm not going to do this for every single parameter that we're going to talk about, but just to show you how you could experiment in real time without having to write any code. Let me just try setting auto hide to 0 over here. I'm going to click update player, and once I begin playback, see, this is a very old video. Actually, part of what I'm planning on doing is replacing the default video that we use in this demo with this video, so we'll have a very meta experience if you happen to be watching this while on the demo page trying out these parameters. So the main thing to keep in mind, though, is that the controls at the bottom over here did not disappear during playback. And if I were to go over here and change the auto hide to 1,
that's a good two-man show.
That's a Harvard degree there.
I know. There was a great two-man show, a bronze two-man show by the pool today.
Oh, my God.
Flo and Dan O'Dowd. The only way they can keep those tans is if they continue to do what they did today, and that is tan by the pool. Boy, Dan O'Dowd was a bronze specimen out there, huh?
He keeps going. They're going to mistake him for me. I mean, brother was like gold out there.
I am ready for some breaking news.
Tomorrow it happens.
Oh, it can happen tonight. We're at home for it. Oh, the winter meetings. We missed you. Our coverage of the winter meetings.
Hey,
never stops on MLB Network.
There's no place in the world like Las Vegas, Nevada. It's Hot Stove presented by Cone Resnick, and for the next 4 days, it is the center of the baseball world. It all descends here. We're thrilled to bring you Hot Stove live from Las Vegas. We have the latest on Harper, Machado, much more. Ken Rosenthal is in the house, plus GMs for days. Rick Hahn, Mike Hazen, Dayton Moore of the Kansas City Royals, all stopping by. Next 2 hours of Hot Stove starts now. Here are your hosts, Matt Vasgersian and Harold Reynolds. Good morning, gentlemen.
Lauren, good morning, and we are all rather fit and fresh on day one of the winter meetings. Ken Rosenthal, the busiest man on the floor, has taken a seat for the first time in the last 48 hours.
He's on the big kids table.
This is the most rest Kenny's gotten in about a day and a half.
It's true, and it's an honor to be at the big kids table, but I must say, the reason I'm here is we've lost a valuable member of our Hot Stove team in the transition from Secaucus to Las Vegas.
Who's that?
That would be the soundboard.
Yeah.
Meet me up on the desk to maybe provide a little bit of extra voice. I don't know.
We're taking a 4-day break from the soundboard, and because we are working with limited space here, Keith Costas, our very own, who decided to bring his body double, his stunt double with him to the winter meetings.
I mean, look at this.
Relegated to the kids' table today. Keith Costas and Keith Costas' stunt double with us this morning. Welcome to both of you.
It's a weird place, guys. I did not expect there to be a market, though, for Keith Costas in person.
It's Vegas.
It's Vegas. You never know what's going to happen.
Never know.
Charo impersonators, all that plays
come
here.
on.
So there's a lot to get to today, including, Kenny, the very latest in free agency and in the trade market. But the first official announcement that came out of the winter meetings yesterday, the Hall of Fame announcement that puts Lee Smith and Harold Baines into Cooperstown, the Today's Era ballot, named those two veteran players as Hall of Famers yesterday. And I know that one was much closer than the other when it came to the writer's vote during his eligibility.
That's right, Matt. And this announcement yesterday was no less than shocking. It was a shocker. Harold Baines fell off the ballot after 5 years, never got more than 6.1% of the writer's vote. You need 75% for induction. In this Veterans Committee yesterday, today's game era Veterans Committee, you see, Lee Smith got all 16 votes. He was a guy that never really had that much support on the writer's ballot either, topped out at 50.6%. And then Baines with 12, just enough, and Lou Piniella just missing. So people are going to say, whoa, whoa, whoa. If you could give Harold Baines a plaque in Cooperstown now, what about, and you can list any number of players.
What, like about 30.
Dale Murphy,
yeah.
Dave Parker, Dwight Evans, Keith Hernandez, Edgar Martinez, Fred McGriff, go right down the line. That's a fair argument any fan could make for his player. But the problem is that the writers, I don't believe, are going to change their standards. So if these players are going to get in, they're going to have to get in through one of these Veterans Committees.
But that's not a surprise, though. You basically have to get in through the Veterans Committee.
And it's fine. That's the way the process works. But Harold Baines, and H, I know you're going to disagree with me on this, but by the standards that the BBWA has applied for years and years, he's not even close. He's just not that guy. He was a great player. There's no doubt about it. But he would be, for me, in the Hall of the Very Good, not the Hall of Fame. And you see his year-by-year vote totals from until finally falling off at 4.8.
But this is why you have a Veterans Committee, because the voters, the writers don't always get it right, and they don't see the same eye out that the players do. And that's fair from both sides. And we can say the Veterans Committee doesn't always get it right either. That's the controversy of having a Hall of Fame ballot. But for players like Harold Baines or the list of guys that you just listed, this is their only hope, because I think there's too many restrictions now. When they limited, you can only vote for 10 guys on a ballot instead of 15. That's why Harold Baines gets 6% and you're gone. And because you're selecting now as they pile up over the years, you've got 20, 25 possible candidates. You only pick 10. So some guys are going to drop off. The only way they're going to get a possible look is through the committee. And it can be
fine. That's the way it's supposed to work.
And I think the difference here with the committee that I said last night, now let's come back, but these guys either were managers, general managers, executives, or players against this body of guys that they voted on.
All right, but we get accused as the writers of all kinds of atrocities at Hall of Fame.
True, and rightfully so.
We don't have, I don't believe, this question of cronyism that some of the members of that committee would have with some of these players. And that is going to be the problem. Harold Baines had some support from Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of his team. Dale Murphy's not getting that from the owner of the Braves.
Right.
It's not the same ownership.
Right.
So that is a problem. Now, last year, Jack Morris and Alan Trammell get in. I don't know that anybody really had a problem with that. The writers never inducted Morris, but a lot of people felt he was really close. Well, Harold Baines, and again, I don't want this to come off as disrespectful toward Harold. I covered him. I love the guy. Class act, Hall of Fame person, no doubt about it. But when you're talking about this place, Cooperstown, and he's in, and all these other guys are not, Harold, the Veterans Committee is not going to elect all of them. And the other part of this is Piniella missing by one vote. A lot of people feel he should be in, and two others, George Steinbrenner and, most of all, Marvin Miller. You talk about impact on the game, it's not even close. These guys should be in there by the Veterans Committee, and they're not getting
But I look at it this way. Last piece on this, from the player's perspective, the writers had an opportunity. They didn't do it.
True, correct.
So there is no beef there. They shouldn't. You didn't do it. You had your chance. You made your stance. Okay, it goes to the Veterans Committee to fight for players.
Well,
and
people
for
can
me,
complain about our votes.
Me,
we can complain about their votes.
No doubt, and that's great. I think it's great. It should be argued. It should be complained about. That's why we have these things. But for me, Harold Baines was one of the most impactful players I ever played against. That's my viewpoint. Obviously, the committee had the same thing. He almost had 3,000 hits. He ended up being a guy that got injured and was a DH. It's an amazing story. He was always in the top 10 in hitting. He was the guy you went to in September, I got to get Harold Baines on my team. Whether you were the Rangers making an early run in their tenure, or whether you were the Oakland A's trying to win a championship. So I think those are the things that a player or a committee that's in the midst of that and looking back and saying, the Hall of Fame is about the impact player. And I think Harold Baines fits that mold. We can argue, are there other guys? Dale Murphy, for me, yes, he's a Hall of Famer.
It's a joke that Dale Murphy's not in there.
Yes, but the writers dropped the ball. I'm just saying, there's a lot of
But
things.
I think Kenny's point is that you could make even a better case for the Dale Murphys of the world had the committee had some friendlies to Dale Murphy, arguably a more deserving player, among others, then maybe it would have gone differently. And there's a little problem that's inherent to that process when, to use Kenny's term, cronyism is the deciding factor in getting one player in over another. The process is bereft. That's not right.
That's in Baines' favor and in Lee Smith's favor. I like the concept that a DH and a closer are getting in because, to me, they are players who occupy a position on the field. They are not players who should be penalized for that. Edgar, of course, should get in. The best closers should get in. Lee Smith, we can debate whether he was one of the best. I believe he was. I voted for him on occasion. But those guys getting in, that's going to create, hopefully, a little bit of a more open view.
Well, if I'm Edgar Martinez today, I'm feeling pretty good.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Last point, and I'll let you guys go.
We got to move on from
this whole time. But Lee Smith got all 16. 15 years on the ballot, and the writers never got him in. So I'm just saying, this is what happens.
He's come close. He's come much closer than
But
Harold
close
Baines.
is not in.
Right.
Now he's in. They got him in.
True.
Right. These are Lee Smith's vote percentages. He came as close as he ever did back in 2012, over half the votes.
Close.
Yeah, but we're talking
75%.
6%. Harold, there's a huge difference
I
here.
understand what you're saying.
And again, I like Kenny. I don't want to sound like I'm arguing against Harold Baines because I thought he was a great player as well. I'm just saying
the process.
It's unusual. It was surprising how this went down. And by the way, the cool thing about this, I think, for Chicago fans, both of these players debuted in Chicago on different sides of town during the 1980 season. So we always talk about which communities, which markets are going to travel to Cooperstown for the induction ceremony. I think there's going to be pretty good Chicago representation in Cooperstown this summer.
It's going to be
pretty cool.
Mario gets in this year.
And by the way, we're going to talk to Rick Hahn on this program a little bit later on, talk about the White Sox. But let's move on to the two big-ticket items on the free agent market this winter. And, Kenny, you've written on The Athletic a story that I loved reading it. I chuckled a couple times, and it was informative, as all of your stuff is always, the agent wars between the two representatives of both Manny Machado and Bryce Harper. Dan Lozano and Scott Boras, of course. And the article has gotten quite a bit of reaction from the baseball community.
Well, a lot of times it's easy to forget that it's not just the players who are being involved here. It's the agents who represent them who are taking an active role. And there are rivalries that exist between agents just as there are rivalries that exist between players. Scott Boras is basically every agent's rival because he's been the king of the mountain for a long time, and rightly so. So here's Lozano. He's got Manny Machado. Boras has Bryce Harper. And they both believe their guy is the best guy. Now, the market's going to determine it. You'll see the numbers right there through the age 25 season. They're both terrific players, of course. Both questions, no question about it. Harper with his defense last year. Manny Machado with his antics during the postseason. But what's interesting is the dynamic as far as how the timing is going to play out. I don't think fans care who wins as an agent, but they do care when these guys are going to sign. And the suspicion in the industry, or the assumption, is that Boras is going to want to go last. He's going to want the agent version of last licks, the ability to top the Machado deal. And Machado is not necessarily going to come off the board at these meetings because he and his agent, Dan Lozano, they're meeting with teams. At some point, if he hasn't already, he may make visits to teams. We don't know that. So I don't expect either to get done here. And part of it has to do with this jockeying between the two agents and the one-up game that they're playing.
Yeah, it's real interesting, no doubt about it, with the agents. But I think as the players, Manny's got some work to do. He really does. He has to go back and sell him as a person. And that is going to take a lot more time than Bryce Harper negotiating with teams over who's going to step forth with the most money.
Sure.
He's put himself in a very difficult situation to now – you don't have a baseball game to go out and play and hit 3 home runs and everybody's enamored by your talent. That's the worst thing about the offseason is you sit here and you watch reruns, and the more the rerun of him stepping on somebody, the worse it looks.
So, Hal, do you think it's possible?
Yeah,
you think it's
right.
possible Bryce goes first?
Absolutely right about that.
Can Bryce go first?
I could see that happening, and Bryce could go first and make more money just because I think Manny's got damage control. He really does, and that could take some time.
I don't think first position is necessarily a bad thing here because then all the pressure goes to the other camp. And the way your story read on The Athletic, the first thing that popped into my mind were the late-night TV wars between Jay Leno and his representation and David Letterman and his reps back in the day, back when late-night TV was what it was.
Yes.
And it reminds me a lot of that. And certainly we're going to be talking a lot about Bryce Harper and Manny Machado during these meetings.
Well,
so
at the end of the day, I hope the players end up where they want to be because it's about you for your next.
Well, they have to choose.
period
In
of
many
time.
cases, you know this, Harold, in free agency, most money versus place you're comfortable. Too often, players take the most money and go to places where they are not so comfortable. I would suggest Robinson Cano is the most recent example.
Neither one of them are going to be clipping coupons.
No.
And so cry no tears for either side
And no
is
tears.
what I'm saying. All right, we have a lot to get to today. Our first day of live coverage here at the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino. Jim Bowden of MLB Network Radio sending this out. Royals close to agreement with Billy Hamilton, working through bonuses and pending physical. And we'll talk to Dayton Moore, the Royals GM, about that live coming up shortly. In fact, it is a very distinguished roll call of guests coming up over the next almost 2 hours. Peter Gammons will visit with Lauren coming up next. John Heyman, who, like Ken Rosenthal, has not rested at these meetings. And much more on the Hall of Fame vote that put Harold Baines and Lee Smith into Cooperstown. We're just getting started. Day one of our live winter meetings coverage continues next.
Stove is presented by Cone Resnick. Advisory, Assurance, Tax.
the latest rumors and deals from every team on MLB Tonight.
Big name guys are getting traded.
This is must-see TV. I'm in.
MLB Tonight, Winter Meetings Edition.
We welcome you back from Las Vegas. Hot Stove presented by Cone Resnick, hanging with the Hall of Famer Peter Gammons. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thrilled to have you with us. It was announced yesterday that Lee Smith, Harold Baines elected into baseball's Hall of Fame. I have the numbers right here for Smith, an ERA just over 3, 478 saves, which at the time he left the game were the most all-time. Your reaction to the news, Peter?
You know, I was shocked for years that actually Lee Smith didn't make it in. No, saves have been devalued as a statistic, but I think what's most important is understand the era in which he pitched. I mean, he had over 170 saves in which he got 4+ outs. I mean, most relievers now, you come in, pitch the 9th inning. That era, it was Fingers, Gossage, Lee Smith, Bruce Sutter, and Dan Quisenberry are the top 5 in 4+ outs. It just very different. They were pitching in the leverage inning of the 8th inning. Now it takes 2 guys to do what they did. And I think it should be respected. But he was a great reliever. It's just unfortunate the one time he was in the playoffs for the Cubs, he had been hit by a line drive, couldn't throw a slider, and Steve Garvey had a home run that people in Chicago have never forgotten.
Forevermore, right? Harold Baines said he was surprised. He broke down a little bit on the air yesterday. Were you surprised?
A little bit, because I think Harold, he's so modest and sort of quiet person and when he, when he was the number 1 pick of the White Sox and came up with a Bill Veeck White Sox, he was sort of unnoticed. I mean, some people in Chicago appreciated him. He got traded to Texas, and the White Sox retired his number. Let him retire first, but they did that. But I just remember, at that time, there was this guy that once said that there's nothing lonelier than being a South-Sider in a city of North-Siders when you live in Chicago. And that was the way the White Sox were viewed. And I thought it was fascinating, the 2005 World Series, that Ozzie Guillen introduced me to Barack Obama. And so I just asked him, as a South-Sider, who is your favorite player? And he said,
what do you say?
Harold Baines.
Yeah?
I thought that was kind of cool.
I think that's cool listening to you now. Congratulations to both of them. Cooperstown awaits. You talk about dominance, Peter, recent dominance. Look no further than Andrew Miller, high volume years, microscopic ERAs. Give me the best fit in your mind for him.
Well, to start with, I mean, I think you look at he and David Robertson and Adam Ottavino. They're like the second line of relievers, but they're really good, and especially the way bullpens are used today, kind of moving on from the Lee Smith thing. But I think, Andrew was not the same guy. I mean, he 2 appearances, a third of an inning last year in the playoffs after the incredible record that he had in the 3-4 years leading up. But the knee is cleared up. I talked to him the other day, and his knee, it's rest and reload. But they're absolutely convinced that the knee is fine. If that comes, his velocity goes back, the slider comes back. And in classic Andrew Miller fashion, he said to me, my past is not yet my past.
Yeah? What does that mean?
That he has a 1562 college boards. That's the way people like that
think. So revolutionized the way relievers are perceived, really single-handedly. Before you go, Peter, Arenado, Robbie Ray kind of linked as trade candidates. What's your thoughts on this?
I'm told he's just not going to be traded. I mean, he's a great player. He's averaged 40 home runs and 126 RBIs the last 4 years. He's a great defensive third baseman, but he's a free agent at the end of next year. So the Rockies are still contenders, especially with the young pitchers they've developed. And they've got very good pitching staff. You might as well play it out with him and try to make another run, because you never know 2 years down the line. And I'm told they're not going to be able to sign him, and they're not going to trade him. And so he's in Colorado for 1 more year before he hits the market. And we're all talking about it at the winter meetings next year.
Okay. Just the beginning of the winter meetings this year. Thank you so much. Appreciate the time. We're going to take a quick break, a quick timeout on Hot Stove. Coming up, what's the latest with Dallas Keuchel? Is he at the top of the Braves wish list? John Heyman stops by set to give us the welcome you back inside the winter meetings.
The whole network is here.
I am loving this offseason.
Talking about all the rumors and all the gossip going on.
We got moves. Let's talk win-win. They have money. They have players. They could make a move right now. We're going to have some fun.
Everybody in. Come on.
Welcome back to day one of our live winter meetings coverage. Jon Heyman sending this out via Twitter of late. Joel Sherman and I discovered our phones track the number of steps we take daily. The slightly competitive Joel Sherman noted multiple times, and I mean like 15 times, that the only reason I won winter meetings day one, 24K to 19K, is that he was on the plane 6 hours. 24,000 steps, Jon Heyman? Is that what we're talking about here?
A lot of steps. I usually get maybe 200 steps in a day, but I'm just circling the lobby. I also walked to Bally's to play tennis at 5 in the morning. The only people on the road were me and Damon Oppenheimer. We ran past each other. We could hardly see. Ran past and said, "Is that you, Damon?" It's 5 a.m. I told him I'm walking to Bally's. He said, "That's probably not a good idea at 5 a.m." He was probably right, but I did make it. But I will say this about Joel Sherman. Great guy, one of my best friends, not a great loser. Very upset.
It's easy to understand.
You're going to play tennis at 5 in the morning? We had at 6 o'clock with Harold Kaufman of the Mets, and he beat me 6-0, 6-0. So he's pretty good.
Oh, Harold can play.
You're off to a rough start.
Right.
Yeah, at the end, he admitted to me that he was ranked 6th in the 4.0. I don't even know what that means.
Okay.
So,
well, congratulations on getting some rare recreational activity.
Exactly.
Because most of us don't really have that opportunity. You guys in particular chasing things down as you do. And let's ask you about one of the things that everybody's chasing, the need that the Atlanta Braves have, or the desire to add a frontline starting pitcher. And there are a lot of lines being drawn between Atlanta and Dallas Keuchel.
No question about that. I think that is the guy atop their list. They'd like a lefty to go along with Fulton Avitz there at the top of that rotation. I think the Braves are, I don't want to say a favorite, but they've got a good chance. You've got the Reds in there as well. Obviously, they got the ballpark to overcome with free agent pitchers. Not easy to lure them there. And I've heard the Phillies as well. As we know that they tried for Corbin, so they are now trying for Keuchel. So those are the three teams, basically, Braves, Reds, and Phillies that we're hearing the most about. And, I'm not going to count out the Yankees. They're obviously in on J. Happ, but there are 10 teams in on J. Happ. I think Happ will have a deal probably here. I'm not sure it's going to be the Yankees. If not, they may have to reevaluate. And while I haven't heard the Yankees connected to Keuchel much, I do know that people tell me from the Astros organization he would love to pitch in a big stage.
Yeah,
he's from Oklahoma, played at Arkansas, played with the Astros, but I think he would not be averse to going to New York.
Does that get done here, Keuchel?
Keuchel, I don't think Keuchel does. I think Happ does. Obviously, we saw Corbin and Evaldi come off the board before the meeting.
Yeah,
which
that had to speed up their process a little bit.
Yeah, so I think Happ, he's got 10 teams. He's been talking. It's pretty clear that's pretty close.
Matt, it's interesting. With Keuchel and the Braves, you have Snicker, who's been in the organization, 40 years.
Right.
Bobby Cox still around. Schuerholz. I'm sure they're kind of dreaming on Glavine a little bit. When you see Keuchel, you can kind of romance with that thought of, hey, he can be another Tom Glavine. Maybe not the Hall of Fame, but
if Keuchel lands elsewhere, and I think I'd be surprised if he doesn't go to Atlanta, where would they turn for that top of the rotation guy? Because as you mentioned, some of those names have been plucked off the board.
Yeah. Well, they do have great prospects, so you can't rule them out. We haven't heard them connected much to the Cleveland pitchers, but people think that there's a decent chance that one of the two Cleveland pitchers will get traded. And if Atlanta gets involved, I think Cleveland would be very happy because they have prospects.
Interesting. Let's keep you in the NL East and talk about the Washington Nationals, who have a very long list of names to choose from on the free agent second base board. And this via your Twitter account. Looking closely at LeMahieu, Marwin Gonzalez, Josh Harrison, all in play. There are a lot of names at second base.
There really are a lot. Obviously, Kinsler and Dozier as well, who've had very good careers. But those are the three names I'm hearing now. Marwin and Harrison are interesting because they play multiple positions, and Washington does seem interested in both. LeMahieu, excellent defensive player, I think a bit underrated. And so they have three good choices. I have not heard Murphy at all connected with the Nats to this point. I think the feeling of some is that he's probably an American League player. Still a great hitter, but probably an American League player at this point.
I'm surprised they didn't take a look at Jonathan Scope. Coming in at the number he was at, maybe they were caught up at the time working on the pitcher.
Yeah. Well, Scope didn't have the year that LeMahieu and Marwin had last year. He had a tough finish. I think he's a good player with potential. I think that was a good, some might call it a flyer. I think that was a good gamble by the Twins.
If I'm an agent and I represent one or two of the second basemen on that list, I am really eager to get a job done because at some point the music's going to stop and somebody's not going to have a chair.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of teams at second base. Potentially the Dodgers, but I think Colorado, who will probably lose LeMahieu, they have some in-house options between Hampson and Rogers and people like that. So there may be a paucity of teams looking.
Yeah, but I think you got to take Marwin Gonzalez and Josh Harrison and throw them in a whole different bucket.
Very good point.
Really
good point. Marwin is getting interest from 15 teams.
Yeah,
and he can play any position. It's a rare player that can play a little center or short if you need to.
And I think with those hybrid guys that can do so many things for you, when you say you're just going to play second, I don't think they're as valuable. The production's not there. They don't seem to be the same player. And so with those two guys, if I'm representing them, I'm sitting there saying the money for where you're at is examples of what the game is at, that versatility.
Yeah, second base used to be the lowest paid position. They used to have kind of a cap at second base where Jeff Kent and the Stars were at that point. But in my opinion, LeMahieu is underrated. He is a second baseman only, but an underrated.
And if the Rockies are willing to let him walk, and I hear you about what they have in the pipeline to replace him, I can't help but fantasize about Daniel Murphy in Denver and flirting with the potential of hitting 350 plus.
He can hit. Over the last 4 years, he has hit for a higher average than everybody but Altuve. The guy is like a 330 hitter over the last 4 years. Clearly will get a good job. I think people are envisioning American League, but there are certain National League teams where he would fit. And he can play first base, too, I think.
So a lot of –
I was just going to say, I want to throw this in there real quick, too. With the discussion of the second baseman and Murphy in particular, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the shift. If we end up regulating the shift, I think it changes the position. You know, it changes a lot of how teams are going to align and what players they go after.
Right.
So I think baseball's got to figure out getting that done, because I think it affects how the club sign.
That will definitely affect things. As we saw, Travis Shaw did a fantastic job at second base last year, but that's a year where we had a shift, and you could move a big athletic third baseman and was able to do it. But if you're alone there, you're probably going to want a LeMahieu, a Harrison, or somebody like that who can cover that ground.
Okay, so a lot of second basemen on the market. Not a lot of catching help on the free agent market. So a lot of teams who are in need at that position, and there are a number of them, are scratching at trades. And JT Realmuto's name has been popping up now for the last couple of years. Seems like this would be the year that makes sense. If they're going to move him, time is right. To where, and is that going to happen here in Vegas?
Yeah, I couldn't swear that it'll happen here. I would kind of say I doubt it. It seems like they're still a ways away. I haven't heard of a lot of movement.
Well, John, what's going to happen here then, man? You got to give us something's going to happen.
I think one of those Cleveland trades might happen. We're going to see some free agent signings of some stature. As I said, I think Happ will sign here.
Let me get you back on JT. So what do we got here?
What's interesting is that the NL East teams are the teams that love him. They see him the most, and they really appreciate him. The Marlins have told everybody that they prefer to trade him out of the division. I don't think that is a be-all and end-all. I think they're considering it. The Phillies and the Mets are, as I am told, circling on this. And I've heard that the Braves have not given up, that they are still somewhat involved. Now, the Braves have signed McCann. They have Flowers. They seem to have catcher solved, so I would think they're less likely. Obviously, the Marlins would like to have the Braves involved because of all those great prospects, but I do think the Phillies and the Mets are real possibilities for Realmuto. And outside the division, the Dodgers, to me, look like a perfect fit. They have that left-handed bat, those left-handed hitters, and I think they can make a match. But the Mets do, too. They have Nimmo and they have Conforto. The thing with the Mets is they do not want to give up both Nimmo and Conforto, and they don't want to trade Rosario at all.
Looking at Realmuto's numbers, and I'm looking at that and I'm going, not that he's going to be the MVP, but look at the spike in Yelich's numbers when he got to a ballpark. What Stanton's going to continue to do. Didn't matter where he plays at. But
let me ask you this then. Talking about Stanton, would you do this right now? Would you if you're the Yankees? Would you do Gary Sanchez for JT Realmuto? Apples for apples. Just no additional nothing. No cash considerations.
All day long.
Yeah.
All day.
Couple pieces. I think they look at it as they got to get the idea, and I don't know if they've had any serious talks, that it would be basically, as you said, a 1-for-1, and they don't want to do that. They want 3 or 4 pieces.
I threw a Salvador Perez for Sanchez last year.
Look at you segueing wonderfully to our next guest, speaking of the Royals. John Heyman, thanks for the conversation. Early morning tennis with Harold Kaufman, and you are still chipper at this hour with a lot of meat left on the bone today. And we're just getting started. Speaking of the Royals GM Dayton Moore is getting wired, ready to join us on day one of our live winter meetings coverage from the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino. More Hot Stove coming up right after this.
A fiery closer ahead of his time. Now a colorful character in the booth. But his biggest save happened off the field. There's more to Eck than baseball. MLB Network presents Thursday, 8 Eastern on MLB Network.
straight multi-hit game. And 6 hits sends everybody home.
You rank them, you watch them. MLB Network Countdown, the year's top stats and oddities. Sunday at 7 Eastern on MLB Network.
And welcome back to Hot Stove's coverage of the annual baseball winter meetings presented by Cone Resnick. Daybreak in Vegas, and Royals GM Dayton Moore gets up, I think, earlier than most of them. Good morning to you, Dayton. Good to see you.
How you doing, Dayton?
What's going on, Harold?
Good, man. Good. Good
so
to see you.
Guys are already out there on the transactions wire. Not a done deal yet, but there are reports that Billy Hamilton.
It's amazing it got out.
It is.
It's incredible.
There are no secrets, as you well know, right? So tell us about the desire to add a speedy center fielder.
Well, I mean, truthfully, since the departure of Lorenzo Cain, we've had some, trouble covering Kauffman Stadium. It's one of the largest square footage of any outfield in baseball. And so we desire players that can range in our ballpark. We like speed. And so we've been tied to him, to Billy. Nothing's complete at this point in time, but, he's a type player that we covet.
I have flashbacks of Willie Wilson, being able to fly all over the place, switch hitter.
Yeah.
I'd be pretty good fit for him.
Yeah, I think so. You know what? We like to put the game in motion. We like action players. We're trying to do a much better job of not striking out. In the last couple of years, not by design, but just really a product of the players available to us, we got away from how we really like to play. We focus aggressively in the draft and internationally, trying to find those speed action type players as well. It's harder and harder today than it was before, but so when you get an opportunity to get a player that fits your profile, you got to be aggressive and try to acquire them.
It leads me right to my next question, actually, because it looks from the outside looking in with Whit Merrifield and winning a Major League stolen base title last year, establishing himself as a Major League star player, like a return to the 80s Royals, like short of the
Chris
AstroTurf.
Owens too. We just signed Chris Owens. He's a very versatile player. He can play obviously all over. He can run. He can steal bases. He's very smart, excellent base runner. So those are the types of players that we want to put on the field as much as possible and let them go play. Ned embraces that type of style as well, obviously, and so it's really important for us to give him the type of weapons that he can utilize and match up with.
Well, you brought something up where putting the ball in play. The Red Sox did it, won a World Series. The Astros did it. Seems like your Royals teams set that trend to do that. So where are we at in the pendulum of baseball between power, speed, put the ball in play, doesn't matter? Where are we? We closing that gap at all?
Well, I believe that, and I've always believed this, that there are times in a Major League Baseball game where it is absolutely unacceptable to strike out. Okay, and we all understand and realize what those situations are, and again, I think you have to put the game in motion, and you need action players, especially as I said in our ballpark. We're not going to hit the ball out on a continuous basis, on a regular basis anyway. We all know power costs a lot of money. Power tends to develop a little later in a player's career. Well, you can put the formula together, and in Kansas City, they're often gone. They're in free agency, or we can't afford them anymore. So we have to have players that can really play defense, can utilize their speed in a very productive way. And if we can do that, we feel that those types of skills will show up every single day and give time. It's hard to count on them to be a consistent offensive producer as a hitter. But if they can run and play defense and utilize a part of their skills to help you win, they feel like they're contributing to the team, and they can help you win.
And it seems like pitching is the fastest way to turn things around. You were talking about the draft. You drafted a lot of pitching early on, some college pitchers that'll probably get there soon. What was the philosophy behind that?
Well, we didn't know it'd fall the way it did. Of course, we went into the draft. Lonnie Goldberg and our scouting staff went in there trying to acquire as much pitching as we could. We wanted to get some advanced college pitching that could perhaps move quickly, and we were able to do that. It fell well for us.
Like 4 or 5 of your first picks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just, again, wasn't necessarily, we didn't expect to get that many of them, but in the end it worked out really well. Now, as we all know, the tough part's developing them. And, everybody can recognize who are the most talented guys in that particular time in their career. But now you got to keep them healthy. You got to develop them. You got to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make sure that mentally they stay strong. You got to, and I believe you've got to do what you can to develop the mental health and the spiritual health of the player. I think it's really important. We all have all this information. It's not necessary. Everybody has the same information. It's how do you apply it? When do you apply it to the players? How do you utilize the player? But the things that are never going to change in this game is who has the ability to concentrate, who has the ability to focus, who has the ability to make good choices off the field to free them up to do what they naturally want to do and love to do on the field. And so that's the challenge in player development. It's not necessarily, in my opinion, how to utilize all the technology, because players are all wired differently, but they all need the spiritual and the mental guidance to be successful long term.
Let me ask you about one player specifically, Dayton. As you guys kind of retool and recraft the roster, you've got Sal Perez, who at this point, I don't think it's an overstatement to say he could be seen as something of a franchise icon. Really one of the guys so responsible for the 2015 World Series title. Your veteran leader, without a question. Is everybody in play on the roster today to make you better, or are there some players that are truly untouchable?
Nobody's ever untouchable. I mean, you always have to have an open mind and look at ways to make your team better, obviously, for the current and for the future. I mean, we have to evaluate that. Again, I don't think you should ever stop looking at this game through the lenses of a young boy. And so there are players that are very, very important to a community, especially like Kansas City. Salvador Perez is certainly one of them. Whit Merrifield is one. Alex Gordon has been that player, for years. Eric Hosmer was that type of player. Mike Moustakas, Lorenzo. I mean, so we've had those types of guys in the past. Our fans also understand that there comes a point in time where players will move on. It's part of the game. There is a business side of this. We try not to focus on that. Our young fans, people that are really diehards, they just want to connect with the players. They want to know their stories. They want to watch them play. They want to see them in the community. And Kansas City expects that. We understand what our culture is about and what our environment's about. Salvi is a huge part of that. We've helped raise him since, he was 16 years old, and we've watched his development, and he means a lot to our city and a lot to our team. And I don't believe that you can ever win a championship unless you have a catcher that everybody has confidence in, who works harder than anybody else, cares deeper than everybody else, competes for everybody else. Salvador Perez does all that.
I got a harebrained idea that I want to run past you here before we would let you go, because I know you're a scout and a player development guy at heart. Is there a chance that there's all these kids looking for jobs here at the winter meetings? You find a kid, give him a job, hand him $20 on Sunday, have him go across the parking lot to Arrowhead, sit in the family section, and try to schmooze any of the Mahomes family to get them to play baseball.
Oh, we missed the boat on that.
Oh, there's a talent pool there. My goodness, it's unbelievable.
They got another one coming. 2 more.
In the NFL?
One's, yeah. They got to get to college. They're younger. But another one plays baseball as well.
Okay.
You can see the baseball characteristics in him, obviously.
It's true.
Throws on the run.
He made last night.
Yeah.
Look.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's fun to watch.
They must be going
he's
nuts
really fun.
for him and for what's happening across the parking lot.
It's been a lot of fun watching him compete and watching him play.
It's fun. It's good stuff. Hey, we appreciate the time, Dayton, as always.
All right. Thanks, Earl.
Good to see you. Happy holidays, and good luck in 2019.
Appreciate it.
Dayton Moore joining us. Our live coverage continues from the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino after a quick timeout. More from day one of baseball's annual winter meetings coming up next.
Hot Stove is presented by Cone Resnick. Advisory, Assurance, Tax.
the latest rumors and deals from every team on MLB Tonight.
Big name guys are getting traded.
This is must-see TV. I'm in.
MLB Tonight, Winter Meetings Edition.
All right, welcome back. Lauren Shahadi rejoins us with some of the rumor and innuendo being floated out there irresponsibly by the MLB Network.
Stop that on the
insiders.
double. That's not
What
irresponsible.
are they making up now?
I need your full attention. I know you hate when I say that. Dodgers showing interest, continued interest in free agent DJ LeMahieu, sources say. To which you say what?
Go for it and get 2 at-bats a game and then be in a platoon for the next 3 years.
Wow. Fiery today. This from Bob Nightingale of USA Today. Several teams have expressed interest in Brandon Belt, who's available in talks with the Giants, a fan favorite there for sure. And one more. What do you say? Irresponsible? No.
What time of night did Nightingale send that out, by the way?
Stop it. Just pay attention to
6
John
a.m.
Heyman, man.
Nightingale in Vegas. What could go wrong?
3 mystery teams interested beyond the known: Yankees, the Bills, the Sox, and he may well have, but no one seems to know who they are. That's why
I
they're
love how
a
he
mystery.
writes in his own voice. You know what I mean? Some people, that's how he talks.
Makes it easier to understand. There are skeptics. One exec opined he'll get paid. The market is limited.
The old mystery team. It's a tried and true old age game. You know what the mystery team is sometimes? It's the Springfield Isotopes from Simpsons.
I'm sweating.
Like
This
fiction.
guy, Matt.
There's some real stuff to talk about. No fictional mystery teams in the Corey Kluber sweepstakes. Is he moving? Ken Rosenthal enlighten us next.
Weighted runs created plus, launch angle, exit velocity. They're all important, but the ring is the thing. During the offseason, we'll break down every big move on the show for the thinking fan.
MLB Now, today on MLB Network.
Step right up to the off-season circus on Intentional Talk with hot takes on rumors, roster shakeups, and free agent deals, all the way to opening day. Millar, Rose, Intentional Talk.
Albert Pujols has indeed signed a 10-year, $250 million deal to become the newest Angel.
You gotta kind of follow the money.
Guys, we're gonna get a cocktail. Who do we have to pick up off the floor right now?
Every year we get shocked at this thing.
A great new chapter in my life and my career.
We get our heads spun around.
We're excited to be here for many winning seasons ahead.
The big news that happened about an hour ago. Chris Sale going to the Boston Red Sox.
This is unbelievable. I haven't slept since Saturday. Feel the burn, Millar.
All of our insiders are on location.
Are there any drunk managers out there yet?
Money is big. Pitchers are getting it.
And let's see. Oh, there it goes. And
it's an exciting event. I love the winter meetings.
Everybody in. Come on. Excellent. Excellent. 10 years of winter meetings coverage. Yeah, that's right. MLB Network is turning 10 years old on New Year's Day. Where did the time go, Kenny and Harold? That's the anniversary logo that we've just unveiled recently.
That's pretty good.
Pretty amazing. Year-long celebration of 10 years of MLB Network programming starts in January. Happy 10th anniversary almost, lads.
Amazing, man. 10 years.
As two guys that were here in year one.
Not right away.
You weren't
I
here
came
right
in the
away,
middle of the
Kenny?
first year.
Really?
Yeah.
Even negotiating took a while.
Welcome back to the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino, day one of this year's winter meetings coverage, and there is so much to get into with Kenny as we've reached the top of the hour. And for the guys that soared with the Eagles last night and are waking up late, snapping on the TV here in Vegas to try to figure out what the Indians are doing. We've been kind of waxing on this for much of the offseason already. If there's a deal for a Corey Kluber, a Trevor Bauer, is Chris Antonetti's group going to be active here in Vegas? Is that happening this week?
I don't know that it happens this week. They're certainly talking about it. And the way I understand it, they're talking about two different kinds of structures. One would be a straight trade, Kluber somewhere or Bauer somewhere. The other would be attaching a salary to one of those pitchers in order to clear more money, which is part of the goal here. But if you do that, if you attach a Jason Kipnis or Edwin Encarnacion, then you're lessening the return. And that might not be the Indians' primary objective. I would expect that talent would be what they want the most, even more than financial relief, which they would get simply by trading one of the pitchers.
Could you see a scenario where they both went to the same team? Kluber and Bauer.
Harold, you never say never,
move.
but that's not their intention. What they're trying to do is stay atop the AL Central while reconstructing their roster, making their payroll more flexible. If you trade both Bauer and Kluber, you have a much harder time winning the AL Central.
What's the guy? Bauer's got 2 more years of control left,
Correct.
and Kluber's in the.
Bauer has arbitration this year and then arbitration next year. So his salaries are uncertain. And that's part of the issue for the Indians. If Bauer has a big year, a Cy Young type year, which he was having last year before he got hurt, he could get up into the $18 to $20 million range. And at that point, he'd be a lot more difficult to trade and really outside of where the Indians want to be.
So is that what you mean by attach a salary? Sign him maybe before arbitration so the other club knows what he's going to get and then trade him?
That's one option. They could certainly do that. But really what I'm talking about is attaching a salary of another player, a Encarnacion, and that lessens the trade value.
Okay. You know, back to what we were talking about earlier with John Heyman, the glut of second basemen on the free agent market. If the Indians do a deal and include Kipnis, it could further complicate the free agent second base market. And how does that affect, how does that affect second basemen under contract? Guys like Scooter Gennett. I mean, I'm not quite sure that the Reds are ready to win this year. Gennett would be an attractive trade chip if they want to get into business somewhere else.
They want to move Scooter Gennett, is my understanding. Now, for all the reasons you just said, Matt, it's going to be really difficult. We'll be in the $10 million range. Now, he offensively has been arguably the best of these guys over the last couple of years.
He's going to want
certainly
to
better than all this.
That ballpark, too.
Right. But at the same time, the Reds have a top prospect named Nick Senzel. They want to get him into the mix. He's a second baseman. He can play other spots as well, but really a second baseman. And if you get him in that spot, then maybe you sign someone else. Josh Harrison, a native of Cincinnati, maybe comes in on a one-year deal, plays some infield and outfield. There are a number of ways they can go. They're staying open-minded. Of course, they are in the pitching hunt as well. Sonny Gray trade, all kinds of possibilities. They've been one of the teams talking to Cleveland. So the Reds are a team to watch here. We had Dick Williams on before, I know, and they're going to be active this winter. I'm just not sure what shape it's going to take.
So, Ken, it's interesting how the players are reacting, too. And I don't want to use the word panic, but when I hear Michael Brantley talking about, hey, I can play some first base, you know, and you start looking at the possibility, the versatility thing is so real now. Are we going to see maybe some of these second basemen start to look at different options that they can play? And just not even them, but the player market, there's a glut of players, not just second base, that are out there looking at getting creative to get a job.
Yes, I would expect that would happen because, Harold, you're absolutely right. Versatility is at a premium right now, which is why a Marwin Gonzalez, a Josh Harrison, these guys might be in a little bit better position than the Jed Lowrys, who play purely second base, and some of the other second basemen in there. There's no doubt teams now want players who can play multiple spots. And Michael Brantley has played first base. That's his thought process. Hey, I've done this before. Why not? He did it in the minor leagues years ago, but apparently he still can do it and is a great athlete. So, yes, we've seen the emphasis on versatility, and it's going to be reflected in the moves that are made here and beyond.
We've talked a lot about the Indians this offseason. I want to hit you on a team that we haven't had as much discussion around, because while the Angels are reportedly missed on Corbin, we understand that they were in there to a degree. They've lost Garrett Richards to free agency, signed with the Padres. That rotation was injury-riddled last year, and that's the biggest understatement of the season for them. Where are their free agent efforts leading them for pitching specifically?
Well, Matt, you mentioned Corbin. They were in on Corbin. They were also in on Nathan Eovaldi.
Oh, wow.
So that leads you to believe that they're more prominent in that market than perhaps we would have initially thought. They non-tendered Blake Parker, which was a bit of a surprise move. He's about a $3.5 million reliever. My understanding is they've also been trying to trade Cole Calhoun, $10.5 million next year. They have some financial flexibility. It seems they are trying to create more, and there is no doubt that they are trying to get starting pitching. Because, remember, it's not just Richards that's gone. Shohei Ohtani is not going to pitch in 2019 after undergoing Tommy John surgery.
They need a healthy pitcher.
And here's their group right there. It's not a horrible group by any stretch. In fact, Heaney's quite good. Brewer had a great year. And there's some potential there with Skaggs as well. But
broke down.
But, yes, they've had injury issues, and they need
sounded like
someone,
a soundboard moment right there.
They need someone who's going to be steady for them, and that's why they've been active in these markets.
So are they clearing salary to sign free agent pitching this year, or are they putting those nickels in the piggy bank for Mike Trout?
All of it. And, first of all, the nickels I was just talking about, it wasn't a whole lot of nickels in a relative sense. But they definitely want to clear some, it seems, for pitching this year, and the Trout conversation is another conversation entirely separate. He has 2 years of control left. That's why there's some urgency now. They have to go find some pitching and compete while he's still there. And there's also the expectation that they're going to have a conversation with him sometime in January or February, most likely, about extending his contract and keeping him an Angel for a very long time.
And he's going to say, what are we going to do about pitching?
Well, maybe they will have addressed it by then. Yeah. I'm sure that's part of the thinking here.
Trevor Bauer and Kluber, is there a trade possibility with the Angels and Indians? Do the Angels have the prospects to make that happen?
Good question, Hal. Their system's getting better. It's not quite fully mature, and they're not really at the point where they necessarily want to trade the few top prospects that they have. These guys are getting closer, the Joe Adells of the world. But who knows? And we say this all the time. Teams are open-minded to anything, and if they can figure out the right deal, perhaps they would be a factor. But I would expect there are other teams that would be willing to pay more for a Kluber or Bauer.
Kenny just got 12 emails and 14 texts during the 5 minutes. Was it
Let's hope so.
Take a look at your phone. I think I probably was pretty close.
4 texts.
Wasn't that far off.
Not saying they're all productive.
Yeah.
Some might be from family members.
Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, there is a minor league team here in Vegas that is among the most successful in minor league baseball. And Peter Alonso, one of the Mets' top prospects, spent the summer at Cashman Field. In fact, it was the final summer for baseball at Cashman Field. We're going to talk to Peter about his life as a young Met next on Hot Stove.
Hot Stove is presented by Cone Resnick. Advisory, assurance, tax.